In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Grey Satuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today we are taking a brief detour into the world of animation again, where we're going to be talking about the 1997 Wyrd Sisters TV production. This was another 6-episode TV adaptation done by Cosgrove Hall after the successful Soul Music adaptation. So do we have...
Which we've covered previously.
Yes, which we have covered previously. Yes. And it would be easy to look back to find it. We don't really have a synopsis, because if you want to know the synopsis of Wyrd Sisters, then go back and listen to our Wyrd Sisters episode.
Sort of Macbeth mashed with Hamlet, but from the point of view of the witches?
Yeah, we've got a lot of Shakespeare. A lot of Shakespeare.
Yes. So yes, listen to that, which was an episode from quite a while ago.
Yes. Okay, so what was your thoughts on?
Well, so this is one we've not seen before, because obviously when we did the Soul Music one, I was very familiar with the cartoon because I had that one on video, and this one I had never seen before. And I'm not even sure I remember why I had Soul Music and not this one. I remember there was something which showed, you can get videos of Discworld cartoons. And I thought, that's cool. And I think I ordered one, and I can't remember why I chose one over the other, if I'm honest. But there we go.
Who knows?
So, but yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It's obviously very much the same animation, and in fact, in the sort of few Ankh-Morpork sections, there's various characters who appeared in the Soul Music one. Like, isn't it the same animated guy? So, there's Hibiscus, and there's Chris O'Prace, and Dibbler, I think, turns up at Lank at one point when there's a crowd. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I thought it was good.
I have seen this before. Exactly how I've seen it, I can't remember now. But it would it have been when it was actually put on? It might have been actually when it was on TV. So yes, I have seen this.
Was it on Channel 4?
It was on Channel 4. Yes.
It seems very Channel 4. All of it.
It's very true. Yeah. So yes, I have seen this before, and it is a good adaptation for a 6-part miniseries. It's
so in fact, when we do these sort of television versions, we tend to go for adaptations, the first sort of topic we'll go through. So yes, I suppose it's a good adaptation. It's very faithful. This one, I think, very much took the core plot. It took most of the scenes. It didn't add anything in specifically that we could think of.
No, I think the only thing added was the Dibbler turning up in.
He was just there very briefly.
Yeah, but that's just very much a Easter egg. But yeah, everything else is there's more lost than definitely
A lot of things were taken out, to streamline it. But that makes sense. I mean, whenever you're adapting a novel into audiovisual, the stuff you kind of perhaps can't convey very well. Obviously, with someone like Pratchett, where there's a lot of jokes within the narrative, some of that gets lost, which is fair enough. We'll discuss that before.
I suppose they didn't tweak anything either. I think Soul Music had a few tweaks to make it work, whereas at this I didn't feel that there's anything tweaked significantly, to make it. It was just.
I think it was more of a straight adaptation.
Yeah, it was more just stuff. The kind of. I wouldn't say extraneous stuff, but stuff around the edges that was chopped.
Well, it's the streamlining. So, the playwright dwarf, who's obviously sort of supposed to be Shakespeare, it shows him getting inspiration. Of course, you can do it audiovisually. Yeah. So it shows him thinking of something that's clearly Laurel and Hardy, thinking of something that's clearly the Marx Brothers. But obviously in the book, there's loads of references to stage and screen and Golden Age of Hollywood and things like that. Whereas obviously in this, it's
just the early.
It's just those two
early film stuff.
And just the comedy as well. But that's fine, because otherwise it would be a bit. Because I suppose when you're doing words, people can read words quite fast, or at least they can control how quickly they read them. But there's more kind of stuff going on in their head, so you can kind of pack it more. Because it's more densely packed in terms of the information.
You're also losing the inspiration particle
bit,
which is obviously
the concept.
The concept that was why Hurl was getting all of these ideas. So you've lost all of that. So really, it's just more of a nod that, that he's coming up with some strange ideas.
He's thinking stuff from Round World.
Yeah, this is why you've ended up with...
That's fair, because that very much wasn't particularly plot relevant. The storm isn't mentioned as an entity.
Oh no, the storm is not. The poor storm. It tries so hard.
It had paid its dues.
Yeah, but you didn't get the storm at the end.
There was a storm at the end, but it wasn't anthropomorphized.
Yeah,
it wasn't. Whereas in the... Well, actually, it's not even quite anthropomorphized, but I guess humanised, or like a very excessive version of pathetic fallacy.
Yeah.
But the point is, we didn't have that characterising of it, which again was something that's very much in the narrative as like a sort of amusing bit that, yes, was hard to translate into.
Yeah, I think that would have been quite difficult to have put across.
Or it would have been seemed like a whole separate plot line. It's like, there are sentient storms now. What's happening? And it's it's not really relevant particularly to any of the stuff happening with all the people. So yeah, I feel like the bits with the Fool and Tom John, while separately they were sort of fine as characters, there's sort of a bit in the book where Wells suddenly realises they look really similar, which I think is... Obviously, you're supposed to notice it on screen, but I guess you didn't notice it. I'm not sure you necessarily would.
I think
they're drawing kind of the same guy's face, but the Fool's quite pale because he lives somewhere cloudy and he's indoors a lot, and then Tom John was more tanned because he's outside a lot and is
and with
somewhere less stormy. I guess
the jester's cap it makes changes the face shape a little bit.
Yeah, and also quite often with cartoon characters, you kind of want that. We'll get into more of this in I guess visual stuff, but you want them to have quite distinctive looks, and quite often clothes are a way of identifying that. So we also, which we'll get to, we're not quite sure how much the voice actors were the same.
yeah.
That's in the controversy section that we may have. Well, not quite, I don't know. Also, with the ghost of the old king, I'm still going to say Verence. That's the other one. Yeah, that's the other thing with, I guess, it being on screen, is that people are saying words out loud, and that's not how I thought that name was.
Yeah.
But I'm saying Verence because it rhymes with Terence.
Yeah, that's
but they say Verence. It's really just a different kind of way of stressing the syllables. But yes, Deaf, when he did explain to him about being a ghost, but he mentioned cats and people of psychic persuasion.
Yeah.
He did not mention close relatives.
Yes.
But of course, the whole thing is in the book is that the castle's clearly haunted, and then it's getting on people's nerves. But then kind of the point is that relatives can't, so it's almost not worth having that as a...
Yeah,
it's a red herring that kind of works in the book, but again, it probably just muddled things on screen.
Difficult also to kind of show that somebody can't see... A character can't see another character on screen.
It's like he can't see the ghost that he's not supposed to be able to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that wasn't the other. Yeah, so that's fair enough. That's I
think that's one of the things that was the narrative purposely muddied a bit. Everyone's a bit spooked in the castle, so you think, this guy's sort of noticing the ghost. It's everyone's a bit it's spooky.
Yeah,
there are bad vibes in the castle, which I guess is the Hamlety bit.
I'm not a Shakespeare.
I mean, I'm pretty good at Macbeth and not very good at Hamlet, but given what I know of Hamlet, I'm pretty sure that cast had a lot of bad vibes.
Fair enough. We do. Speaking of bad vibes, we do lose a lot of the Duke's quirks, and he's obviously I think his descent into madness is a lot quicker.
Yes, with Felmet, they don't have the self harm.
No,
because in fairness, that would have been quite a grim thing to animate.
The animation is pretty basic anyway, so you'd have ended up with basically a red hand of blood.
Which would have been quite gory.
Which is
because the book only alludes to it. It sort of keeps mentioning that his fingers aren't the same size, and you're just supposed to draw your own pictures in your head. But when they're literally drawing the pictures, which again is the thing. But also, yes, he seems to go mad quite quickly, and then just stay there. Whereas again, in the book, he seems to, I think the Fool notices there's a kind of an up and down kind of thing where he sort of seesaws into lucidity, then back away from it again. And so it kind of, it undercuts that character, and I think means that the Countess has a lot more, I mean, she's always incredibly forceful, but she seems to be a little bit more of a driver than him. The ending felt a little bit rushed.
I very much. I mean, you get the bit with you get them doing the play, and then all coming out. All the.
So Granny Weathercock's cast a spell that means that all the actors start portraying what actually happened with the murder,
which is obviously you in the book, and then
and the ghost gets really angry,
and then it's and then ta-da! Tom John's here. He's now the king. And then
he's
then
like, no, what?
No, what? And then it cuts to the next day with Nanny Ogg and Magrat walking in.
I don't even know if it's next day. The book cuts to the next day because they've kind of like. They're having a bit of a sit-down. Tom John's still resisting. I don't know in this it even seemed like it's next day. I felt like they just pulled him in.
I think that Granny Wayne about to say something about, we'll do the coronation tomorrow because it's not good for the land to be out without a king.
Yes, she does say that.
So I think,
but I thought it seemed like then almost immediately the fool was brought in.
I think, to be fair, this is the point of it. Everything just seemed very rushed, and yes, we don't know whether there was a time skip there.
It didn't feel like it.
And then you've got...
It felt like him going, no, 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 and then being a bit like... And, which in the book is what happens. But, it did feel very fast.
And then you've got Magrat and Nanny Ogg coming in and going to, it turns out they're brothers, and giving all that.
But they didn't have any moments to look at each other and be brothers.
No, and then it's... Then that's it. That's it.
And then Variance II is king.
Yeah, and nobody. It's yeah. And then the next thing you know, you got. You see Variance is him, as the king knocking on Magrat's door.
Yeah.
So
and before that, they kind of announced coronation was happening, and then they announced it. They talk about the coronation having happened, and Magrat being all sad because she wasn't invited, and like, you don't have to be invited if you're a witch, you just turn up.
Yeah.
Which, considering we fairly recently did Carpe Jogulum, seems a bit like, unless you invite the witch with some sort of gold-plated invitation, it still doesn't.
Yeah, that one.
But no, I think it's the same thing. It's a bit like, well, I expect to be invited to this, so I shall wait for my invitation. Yes. Which was clearly what Magrat was doing, but in a different tone to Granny.
So yeah, I think, I can see the ending being confusing if you hadn't already read the book, because it doesn't. It's
there's not really any particular foreshadowing of it, and in the
no.
And unless you notice that the guy looks the same, but then you might be a bit like, well, they're using the same face in the animations.
There's a brief mention of.
There's less about the fool's background. I suppose what you don't have is the close third person of being pretty much inside someone's head, which you have with the fool, and you have with most of the characters. Because you have that, obviously everything in television is just that removed as television view. Yeah. So, I mean, you can first person television a little bit more, but, it's not something they were particularly doing at that time. And so you don't quite get what Tom John or the Fool are thinking, particularly unless people sort of say it out loud. And I think the focus is more on the witches. Yeah. And I think it's to the detriment of those characters, which isn't so bad, but it does mean the end feels a bit like... Yeah. And it's just sort of like, it turns out that his mother's the queen. There we go, they're brothers, and he's king. Like, I didn't even say he's king now, and it just sort of happens. And I feel like there at least needs to be a moment where they looked at each other or something.
Yeah, it does feel somewhat... Yeah, just doesn't...
I mean, in some respects... And I think similarly, now that I think about To Masquerade, there's an element of a bit like, here's a curious coincidence, and now this guy's the long-lost relative. And it's like, I mean, that is quite Shakespearean. It's like, we're going to come up with advice. So contrived. But in a different way to opera. But that was obviously the thing. So in some respects, I guess it's mirroring the thing it's doing the pastiche of. Yeah. Except they're a bit more declaiming, I guess. Yeah,
I think it meant that it fell a bit flat at the end. You could have done with
maybe even just a few more bits.
Yeah, just a little bit more to perhaps a smidge of foreshadowing, and then at least a little bit of a bit more of an ending to.
Yeah, because I don't think Nanny Ogg even makes the comment about how popular the Fool's father was with the ladies.
No.
Which is like one of the few bits of foreshadowing you get before. It's only kind of, I think she only says it's her and Magrat pushing the Fool up the aisle.
Yeah.
Speaking of names, that's the other one, because I said Magrat, but they're like Magrat.
Yeah.
But again, it's just different emphasis on the syllables.
What I did like, one bit of adaption I did like, obviously we get a brief flashback to the Fool being taken to the Fool's Guild to be inducted, and they've got in the background the Fool's Guild doing basic Gregorian chants of the official jokes that are funny, and just this deadpan.
It's very somber,
droning, somber.
Yeah. Gregorian.
Yeah, of these, what are supposed to be, and these are, supposed to be classic jokes they're doing,
I could not discern what any of the jokes were.
And I think that's kind of the point.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure, maybe you could, my hearing isn't great.
But I think it's just, but this idea that, and it's obviously spelled out in the books that this place is such a, dull and, almost, joy-sucking
it's kind
play.
of kind of abusive. Like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's one of the darker bits in Ferentz's kind of recollections is that they're kind of almost a little bit envious of the assassin kids who are next door.
Yeah.
But I think it's not necessarily they're envious of the ones who are graduating. I think they're envious of the ones who fail, which is like a bit grim.
Yeah, I mean,
So
the whole thing.
It doesn't quite show that, but it does show it as this very it's very prison-y.
Yeah, which, you've obviously get in the books with Ferentz's.
It's like a prison where they painted clowns on things.
Yeah, so it's just, I thought that was quite a nice little,
I quite liked that when they're doing the play, because obviously in the book, and we sort of discussed this even more with soul music, like you have the description of the performance, like in both of those books are about performances.
Yes.
And then they're putting it on TV, so you have to show the performance rather than just have people describe it. So obviously in soul music they came up with all the music and then the costumes, and they're obviously going through sort of history of rock with that in some respects. With this, obviously it's kind of like Shakespearean type acting, and there were some bits where Tom John was giving speeches, and I wasn't, like in the dwarf bar where he's trying to stop there from being a bit of a riot because the fool's gotten drunk and isn't being particularly friendly to the people whose bar it is. But when they're doing the play in Lanka, and it's kind of in the background because it's like the fool talking to Magrat or Nanny and Granny reacting to things, they're actually doing lines from Macbeth, which, as I say, as a player, I know pretty well, particularly the witches bits. Yeah. And I was like, oh, they're actually just, because of course you can just use Macbeth, so
you might as well.
So that I thought was nice. Yeah, you can just use some actual Shakespeare. I think some of the other bits may have been that. It just wasn't bits I'm familiar with because there's certain Shakespeare plays I know very well, but there's more that I'm not very familiar with.
Shakespeare's got a rather wide catalogue.
Yes. Shall we go on to casting?
Casting, yes. This is where it gets. So we've got some quite, well, I'm not sure how much of an A-lister they were at the time, but big names in it. So we have Christopher Lee once again returning as Death.
I think we said before how much we thought he was good at that.
I mean, no notes once again.
There is a bit where because they keep in the bit where there's an actor who's playing Death in the play, and he's trying to remember his lines, and then he sees actual Death face, and then Death goes on to do it. Then Death forgets his lines. Yeah. I wasn't sure if the actor who was supposed to be playing Death was also voiced by Christopher Lee. It's not clear. Like, he sounded quite similar, but, like, not as kind of booming and hollow. Yeah. Which I think is then what was said to him. Because at one point, Tom John says, I do it this way, and then it's Christopher Lee does that bit. Yeah. Because the whole point is Tom John can do all the voices.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it was Christopher. I mean, as we'll get to in a bit, working out who's voiced who is a bit of confusion.
We'll do the ones we know. So, Jane Horrocks was Magrat, and she was very good. I like how everyone had some sort of like very local sounding accent. Yeah. But they all had like quite a strong regional accent. I'm not really good at identifying different accents very well, so I'm not sure it's all the same. But they'd obviously decide, we're gonna do this. But I think it's sensible that everyone doesn't sound like they don't have that kind of plain TV kind of voice. Yeah. That they all sound like they're from somewhere, because the point is Lancre is supposed to be a bit of a backwater and it's very provincial and all that. But she was good. June Whitfield as Nanny Ogg, which I think I knew she was in it, and I hadn't realised which of the older witches she was playing. Because I mean, so Jane Horrocks for Magrat feels like it makes a lot of sense, because she played a lot of, well, she played like quite shy, it's obviously Little Voice, she plays quite a shy sort of character, and then the other thing, she played this sort of slightly kind of like odd, but again not very forthcoming sort of character. Yeah. So that was the thing she did. Back when I was younger and I used to have a fringe, Jane Horrocks was one of the main people would say it looked like.
Fair enough.
Which, I don't really have strong feelings about that one way or the other. And then, so June Whitfield is Nanny Ogg, which is interesting because June Whitfield I've mostly seen in things where that wasn't really how she was.
Yeah, I mean, I can. She certainly does the voice of Nanny Ogg really well.
Yes.
I think if you were, again, wanting to get the physicality in it, I think
she could do it, it just doesn't, it's not how I see her.
No, but I think Miriam Margolis, yes.
Yeah.
Is a bit closer to Nanny Ogg. But yeah, certainly she definitely was the voice of Nanny Ogg, it wasn't.
Yeah. I think, the thing I think a lot of this I'm thinking of Absolute Fabulous, which obviously June Whitfield was in a lot, and Jane Horrocks was in that a bit, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think wasn't she like the assistant?
June Whitfield has been in a huge number of things.
Oh yeah, I mean she's in all sorts of stuff. That was just the main thing I think of I watched regularly. In that she was the more I mean, she wasn't quite exactly straight-laced, but she was a little bit more disapproving and wasn't the kind of free-spirited one. I get the impression a lot of her other characters have been quite mumsy, but not Nanny Ogg-style mumsy.
No.
More like middle-class type mumsy. Although I may be wrong, because as you say, she's done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she's done a lot of radio stuff, which is where...
Yes, fair enough. And then Annette Crosby as Granny Weatherwax.
Yeah.
And again, I think I've forgotten Annette Crosby was Scottish. Because I think the main character I saw, she wasn't playing Scottish, was she? No. So the main thing I know her from is Margaret Meldrew from One Foot in the Grave. Was it Margaret? Yeah, it was Margaret. Yeah, but it's basically Victor Meldrew's wife.
Yeah. So no, she does an excellent Granny Weatherwax.
Again, that I can always see with the kind of slightly being a bit more stern. And I think we'd when we were talking about like who we might cast, we sort of mentioned, I guess, people like Maggie Smith's dead now, but she was one that come to mind. I think I felt like that Judi Dench could do it, except she's a bit shorter than you'd think.
Yeah, the physicality is important to...
Yeah. Whereas I guess Maggie Smith... Is Maggie Smith tall, or does she just seem tall?
I don't know.
I know Judi Dench is tiny. I went to an exhibition once where they had a costume she'd worn at the RSC back in like the 60s or something, and so she's tiny. But it's also hard to tell, because like for a long time she stand next to Jeffrey Palmer, and I think he's fairly tall.
Yeah.
And sometimes her and Maggie Smith would stand next to each other. Anyway, but yes.
So yeah, which is thumbs up. Excellent voice acting there.
And they're all like actresses that have been, were at that point, I guess, around then in various shows that were on a lot. I've only got one more written down, and it's the one that's a bit confusing. So, Les Dennis, he of Family Fortunes, I guess, is the main thing. And various other game shows, but he's also a comedian and actor. I feel like I mostly saw him in...
I think he's mostly famous for Family Fortunes.
Family Fortunes. And obviously he's Scouse, so with that action, which is fair enough. So he was playing...
Well, he's down as being the fool.
Which I could kind of see, yeah.
And then Andy Hockley, who was the voice of Imp in Soul Music... is also down as playing Tom John, but in some of the notes, they say Les Dennis was doing both.
They do sound kind of similar, don't they?
They do. I just don't know. I mean...
But I think I did think, Tom John's the same guy that was Imp.
I mean, certainly
obviously he wasn't doing his Welsh accent.
Certainly on Wikipedia it says so. But, again, I've found conflicting stuff across Wikipedia and IMDb on who was exactly voicing who. And I think...
It's not as clear as it is for Soul Music, is it? There seems to be a lot more stuff and stuff's copied each other, so you're not sure where the source was.
Yeah, Les Dennis is in the credits at the end, so he's definitely in it. So
I mean, there definitely was a certain amount of people being Scouse, because obviously there was Les Dennis, but then also Huel again was kind of Scouse, and I'm like, because obviously Glod and Soul Music was Scouse, and I was like, are the dwarves just all from Liverpool?
Quite possibly. So I think so it's. I mean, the rest of the voice acting was good. We didn't. I
wouldn't say any of it was bad.
No, even and if Les Dennis was doing the voice, I mean, fair dues. If it was a.
Yeah, I think it's just unless the actors were trying to sound a bit like each other or something,
possibly,
and that's what confused us. I find I'm usually okay at sort of being like, that's the same voice.
Yeah. But anyway, so yes, how much Les Dennis, who was the voice of who, not sure, but whoever it was, I think they did a good job. So I think in general the voices were, I mean, perhaps more, the more Scouse than I was necessarily thought of, but
that's what you're working with.
Yeah, it was the.
Discworld doesn't appear to have Liverpool as such, so it's sort of fine if it's there.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, so Voice acting, absolute casting, yeah.
And again, you had obviously various actors who've been people. There's a lot of people who are obviously part of Cosgrove Hall, doing additional voices and bits and pieces. And obviously, they were saying ones from different bits. I think was the guy who did the voice of Rid Cully in there somewhere. I feel like he was.
I don't think he was.
Was he not? Oh, okay. No. Yeah, it wasn't.
Anyway, so we got it's a.
Yes. Although again, it's Cosgrove Hall, and it didn't have David Jason, even though we know David Jason's super into Discworld stuff.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we'd noticed that quite so much with Soul Music, but having, I guess, recently I'd listened to some stuff, a bit more stuff about Cosgrove Hall history, and they were talking specifically about Count Darkula, but then also the antecedents of that in Danger Mouse, and it was Danger Mouse, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. But then they're a bit like, oh, is it even Cosgrove Hall if David Jason's in it? And I'm like, he's not in either of these. But he's also in the live-action Discworld stuff, because we know that he really wanted to be in that and was, like, mates with Sir Terry. So I don't know if this precedes that relationship or something.
Possibly.
Because obviously he was doing Cosgrove Hall stuff.
Yeah. Possibly he'd rather... Actually,
I mean, he may have been busy filming Only Fools and Horses, which was on at the time.
Would rather have
and which you have somehow not watched, like, a single episode of.
I know about Trigger's broom, and I know about him leaning on the bar and it's not there, and I've seen the chandelier fall, and I've seen them running down the road as Batman and Robin.
But do you understand why that was happening? Do you know that's the same episode as Trigger's broom?
No, because I haven't watched an episode.
Do you understand what Peckham Springs is?
No. Is it some sort of bottled water?
Yes.
Okay. Is it just bottled water from Peckham? Anyway, we're getting off.
Okay, sorry, yes.
This is not
No, okay.
Kathy teaches Dave about Only Fools and Horses podcast.
Will that be our next podcast?
I doubt it.
No, that's fair enough. It went on for a long time. I'm not sure we have the time for that.
No. Anyway, I think as it's animated, you know, we'll talk about the physical representations of the characters in a moment under animation, but you know, casting wise, it's only the voices you're going with, and the voices were, you know, if not perhaps who we'd chosen for some of the other, you know, parts. You know, I wouldn't have necessarily gone for Les Dennis as the Fool, but I couldn't tell you who I would have done.
I mean, it was in '97. I was a bit young to really know who was about and available.
So you know, that's fine.
Yes. Yes, I guess if we're going to the kind of visual stuff, but as we've done the audio now. So as we sort of discussed before in the Soul Music episode, you know, it's the Cosgrove Hall style of animation. It's very distinctive. It sort of seems simple in some ways, in that there's definitely bits where characters are talking and they've zoomed in on the eyes, so it's a bit like we have to animate the mouth. Yeah. I mean, some of their other stuff is notoriously we're going to try and do things kind of cheaply. I think Danger Mouse had an inordinate number of adventures in the Arctic, because then you only need white.
Yep.
But having said that, and which is fair enough, because animation was expensive then, because it was like the old style animation. I don't know how much it costs now, to be honest. That's not a thing I know about. But so it's a very distinctive style, but they're not skimping on it. So it looks, I mean, you said before you think it's simple, but actually it's not minimalist, though. A lot of stuff now is very minimalist, but it's actually, in some places, quite maximalist with the details. You know, you've got the locations. We had it with Ankle Pork, and have a bit of it, you know, because the drum appears again. Yeah. You've got the dwarf bar. And the streets of Ankh-Morpork and the Thieves Guild sort of interacting with them in the street. And then you've got Lanka, and you've got, you know, Nanny's house, and you've got all the witches' houses, and you've got the castle. Yeah.
I think it's simple insofar as it's not highly detailed, but it's not. But it does no. It
I wouldn't say it lacks detail.
No, okay, but it's when I'm talking about, you know, it's. You're not going for, like, creases in their faces and things like that.
But a lot of them have right characterizing. I suppose the point is it's not CGI where they're we're going to make a water effect, or like, here's the fur. That was what they did in Monsters, Inc.
I'm not saying...
That was later.
I'm not saying simple as a derogatory. I'm just saying it is a more simple style that's...
Yeah, but within that animation style, and again, it's very distinctive, there is a lot of detail, you know. I mean, they could have made quite simple characters, and they didn't, you know, they all have personality, even characters that only appear once or twice. Yeah. You know, like the unpleasant bloke in the pub. I was going to say car park. It's not car park. The place where they park the carts. Cart park? Anyway,
yeah.
I don't know what the yard. The yard.
Yard.
Oh no, I can't remember the old words for things. You know, he had, you know, it's not just like, here's, you know, one face and we've done it loads of times, apart from potentially when they're brothers, as discussed. But, you know, everyone's quite characterful, and they show bits, and it's not like they've even, because you could have stripped that story down more and taken out more details, and they don't do that. No. And they put in, you know, everyone's got their own outfit and clothes and stuff. And I mean, you think about it, quite often in cartoons, characters never change their outfit, but I noticed Magrat has at least 2 different dresses.
Yeah, as I say, it's not, it's like, it is, I know what I mean by simple, and perhaps it's not, you know, but I mean, they don't, you know, you're right, and when they do the demon summoning, they use this slightly different... It's a different feel to the animation of the demon. That's
the bit that feels most like, I mean, I know it's all VFX, but like that's the bit that feels most like an effect, because they've done something to make it look very different.
It's a kind of the lines aren't as crisp. I feel it's it's kind of
well, they're trying to make it look a bit like otherworldly.
It's got a fuzzy edge to it, where everything else is crisp lines.
And it's got that very kind of lime green.
Yeah, and it's, which I think really works really well, because you've summoned this entity from the dungeon dimensions, or wherever it's come from.
Wherever the demons live.
Yeah. Hell, I suppose, given Eric, but...
was it called that? I thought it was called something else.
Anyway.
Well, they just call it Pandemonium, because that's where all the demons are.
But anyway, so it was good, that they did something different there to make it stand out.
That was also quite funny, I guess, talking about voice actors, because the point is, in the book, you've got the demon turns up, and then he's a bit deflated by them doing the summoning with just, like, laundry equipment. But in this, they have the whole thing where the guy's all like rah and grunting and groaning, and then as soon as he realizes what's happening, he suddenly becomes incredibly camp.
Yes.
Which just adds an extra layer to the joke.
Yeah.
Although sometimes when he's doing a bit of magic, he goes back to being a bit grunty, growly, but then he goes back to being like quite camp.
You've got to keep up with appearances for a bit.
It's kind of the opposite of having like a customer service voice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. Oh yeah. So that was good for animation. Yeah. And they did throw some sort of the look of it again was this kind of, much like Discworld as a whole, going for pseudo medieval, but then with odd things thrown in. So in the drum, you still had the pinball machine, the arcade machine, which obviously looked a little bit out of place as a...
Yeah, you should comment on that. It's just because Hibiscus is trying to class the joint up a bit.
I know, but it looks out of place for what it's aiming, the idea.
But it was showing a pub in 1997. Those things were everywhere.
But
are they still everywhere?
But there tends to be in them, but yeah. But still, it's Discworld as a whole. That, you've got these, where it thinks it is. I mean, we saw it in when they were depicting Hogfather out in the Hogfather TV show, and some of those, some of the houses, especially the fancy houses, were more. I'm no good with architecture and things, but it wasn't your medieval city. It was later medieval.
I mean, I think the thing with Hogfather is that it specifically covers. Here is how people depicted Christmas at different times. Yeah. So I think feels even more like a spread of time. I mean, Discworld's always been kind of that pseudo-medieval, except a lot of the time the pseudo-medieval is actually depicting early modern. Yeah. But people aren't really taught about early modern specifically as a thing. They've heard of medieval, so they're like, oh, this is old.
And obviously
medieval.
We've just finished reading The Truth, where, it's dealing with printing press and technology and...
Yeah, it's very early modern.
Yeah.
But I mean, and Ankh-Morpork's always been a bit like Renaissance Venice and a bit like various stages of London and a bit like Victorian New York.
Interesting, they depict the Thieves Guild in kind of wearing uniforms.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got these which later on will make them stand out differently versus the bandits that try and... jump the caravan as they go.
Yes, because it's what he's got used to organised crime, and then later he's like, "Oh no, we've paid our thing." It's like, I don't think these guys are in the guild because they're like outside the city, and those are just like bandits in rags.
Yeah, so you got bandits. Whereas in the Thieves Guild ones, you're kind of wearing traditional striped
So you can tell they're robbers.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's like Burglar Bill or like the Hamburglar guy. It's like, we're going to wear this stripy outfit. It's like, that's actually based on old prison clothing. So the idea is the guy who's got out of prison is now doing crimes, like even having changed his clothes. But it's just so you can know who the villains are. They're wearing villain clothes or criminal clothes or something. But it's also the fact that then they have too much money. It's like, oh no, I can't take a job this week. Were they offering them like they were offering them deals though, weren't they? They were kind of advertising their services as they did it, which reminded me a little bit of some other stuff in The Truth, where they start giving people free gifts. Yeah,
that's just bizarre. We'll get to that in the next episode. So I mean, what other animations?
Well, you were talking about how the witches are dressed.
Yes, before. Yes, that I was. Yes, so obviously, especially with the book, I shall wear midnight. We shall, witches always wear black. But in this, it is only Granny Weatherwax that is wearing black, and it's not midnight black, certainly.
Well, that's supposed to be Hans Randy.
But the other two are wearing sort of muted and dark colours, but they are still wearing...
Also, Nanny's wearing red. Well, it's kind of a red top and a purple skirt. And then Magrat has Well, she had one purple outfit, one green outfit, didn't she? But the green outfit had like quite puffed sleeves. This is the thing I mean about not being simple, because they've actually got quite like the clothing isn't simple. You know, she's got. I'm not so great at clothing terms, but that thing where you kind of like have the puffy bit that you sometimes have on the shoulder, she also has it at the elbow as well.
Yeah.
The extra kind of puffy fabric. It's not even puffy.
Just go with puffy fabric, but...
Yeah. And again, you know, it's not unusual, because a lot of the other characters have the same outfit the whole time. I think Magrat's the main person who seems to change a bit. I mean, the actors kind of do a bit because they're playing characters. But yes.
But yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting to see them in different colours. And I think this is where possibly my mental image of them wearing colours, because we had a conversation a while ago, because I've got some of the... I can't remember the company that does them now, but the miniature...
Clarecraft?
No, it's not Clarecraft. Clarecraft is the bigger ones.
Oh, okay.
It's a Polish company who do pewter miniatures of Discworld characters that I've got and painted some of them, which you may have seen online. Certainly the Christmas, the Hogfather.
Oh, okay.
And it was, and my instinct was to paint the other. So I've got the witches, but was to paint Nanny Og and Magrat in colours, which you objected to, so I haven't.
I don't think I judged that with Magrat, because I think the idea was Magrat often wore like white or green.
Okay.
Granny, yes. I mean, I think it's mentioned earlier than I Shall Wear Midnight. I think it's mentioned in books where they wear black, if only because it's sensible and you can't see the dirt.
I think it's this that possibly...
I think it's the pointy hat that was the thing, but...
I think this that gave me that where I was thinking of visual depictions of them having colour.
But I think in terms of animation, as well as the characters having different silhouettes, which they have.
Yes.
Because obviously Nanny's quite short and round, and Granny's tall and thin. And Magrat's actually pretty tall as well, but she's not wearing the hat, and she's much younger. Her posture's not quite so good. But I guess you also want them to be distinguished colour-wise as well. So it makes sense that they're all in kind of slightly different colours, because it just adds an extra kind of character bits to it. But I feel like Magrat always was wearing... I feel like I have her in green and white, and not because she doesn't wear the hat so much either.
No, it's true. She's not. Because
I think a certain thing is made about that in the Tiffany Aching books, but actually Magrat was the same, just maybe as a younger witch thing. Because I never really got the sense of Magrat wearing the pointy hat, whereas I feel like because Nanny was kind of wearing more of a bonnet in this a lot. I thought like it was quite practical, but and then Granny's more wearing the hat. But I feel like the pointy hat thing is very much what Nanny and Granny are doing.
Yeah. So we had an interesting effect where Nanny was sort of borrowing out into the... Granny.
It's annoying how the name's right.
Yeah. We have mentioned that before. Granny was doing the borrowing...
It's because she could feel the land and she's trying to identify it.
So kind of scanning and it turning different... The sort of... It wasn't
quite a negative.
No, it was more of a shift to a red shift. But yeah, and it was a...
showed her doing something. It was like something magic is happening. So now it looks all weird.
Yeah, which was good.
The demon, but different.
Yeah, because I mean, I can imagine that would have been difficult to do.
Yeah, and again, the bit where all the animals turn up and they're arrayed around, which is initially kind of the land saying how it's displeased to Granny specifically. But it just, because they don't react, they just stand stock still, and so they just keep using the same footage of animals looking in a sinister manner. But then later, when the Countess disappears into the forest, it shows them again, and you can tell it's the same bit of footage, but it's like, well, it's been placed, reasonably well. So
we're used to that sort of thing. So that was good. I mean, did we have any highlights of it as a whole? I think we kept some good jokes in there.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about when the animals were getting together. It's Granny saying, when all this is over, some of you better move fast. Which is
yes.
I think it was
yes. I think they showed the stuff with the Fool reasonably well, in that it sort of shows him being around the castle, and then Felmit starts to rely on him more, and then he's told he doesn't have to sleep in stables anymore. He can sleep outside the door. It doesn't actually show that. And the thing with him and Magrat. Because I think there's a tendency, he's obviously keen on Magrat and is asking her out, and then she's kind of going with it a bit, but then there's a bit like, well, you shouldn't serve him. And he's like, but I have to. And he actually, there's that quite principled thing where Aaron said, no, I swore to serve my master until death.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, just don't do it. And he's like, if I'm going to do, and she's like, you don't even like being a fool. He's like, no, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it well. The fact is that Varence is like, well, I'm going to do whatever I'm doing well, which I think is the thing that stands him in good stead as being king, and also explains why he's like that.
Yes, he's going to be a good king for his people, which, For better or worse on that one.
Well, I mean,
it's not too bad, but it's you know, I think the people look at him a bit oddly. Yeah, but
I think they're just not used to me being quite that dutiful in that way.
Yeah.
But
So that's so.
But I think because you could very easily play him as a very pathetic figure, and it's also the fact that he's sort of, you know, when he explains about propaganda and how words can be used to. I mean, it's Felmet and the Countess, but again, it feels like it's more the Countess because Felmet's sort of not so much there. And he's explaining that, and then he explains to Margaret later. It's like, well, you know, yes, they're doing this, but I'm stopping them from killing. So it's kind of the idea of somebody who's in this not great situation is trying to do something, even if maybe it's not the most effective thing. He's trying to do like harm reduction. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you could paint him as a very pathetic figure because I think the idea is he's supposed to appear a bit like that, and all the trying to do the marry and uncle and stuff. He has to do the fooling. But it does show him as reasonably thoughtful and stuff. And I think Wyrd Sisters is obviously, you know, the book with the most of him, and that's the main time you ever get his viewpoint. Yeah. Well, no, you get it a little bit in other ones. There's a bit in Carpet Juggling where he considers Nanny Olga somebody who's usually standing behind Granny Weatherwax. Yeah. So there's little bits, but yes, he becomes a bit more of a distant figure. And then I think he's sort of like, oh, Magrat's husband, who's also the king. Yes.
Well, yes, Magrat's obviously the more important one. Yeah. So yes, all in all, I think we enjoyed it. You can find this on YouTube, as it is, you know, 1997 converted onto YouTube. You know, it's not the best of
quality, I guess.
Yeah, but that's no shadow to no knocking the whole thing. That's just more of a technology. Yeah, it would be nice if they could re-release, because they've not. They initially released these as on VHS, and it had a very brief DVD release.
Okay, I mean, like I said, I got the like 2 VHS version of Soul Music.
It would be nice if they could. I
can't remember where I bought that from.
I'm wondering if they don't have the originals. It would be really nice to have a upscaled version for modern.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff, because I don't know exactly what Cosgrove Hall are doing now, but I think there's a lot of stuff where the rights get a bit knotty. Yeah.
But yes, if you do get a chance to watch it, it's definitely well worth it. Okay, with that, we shall wrap it up for there. So next time we will be back with the truth. It wasn't a lie last time. It's just, you know, our production schedule gets adjusted as we need to adjust it. So we will be back next time with the truth, and so we hope you join us then. Good night.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.